Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with tomato and dirt salad. That's right, I know it sounds delicious, but would a tomato and dirt salad actually taste as good as it sounds? Well, thanks to some extremely crispy rye crumbs, the answer was yes. Plus, as you'll read about in the post, I actually stole this recipe from a bowling alley, so you know it's got to be good. So to get started, we're going to prep some mushrooms. This is going to be the first of 3 main ingredients in our dirt mixture. So I'm going to take 3 brown mushrooms and slice them up. And once I slice them, I'm going to start chopping them, and I'm going to keep chopping them until they're very, very fine. And of course, we're using mushrooms here for their earthy goodness. One could argue that mushrooms are basically living dirt. So that's going to be a very important flavor component here. So like I said, keep chopping and chopping until you have a very, very, very fine dice. And then we're going to transfer those into a skillet with a little bit of olive oil. Well, actually more than a little bit, a few tablespoons, over medium-high heat, along with a big pinch of salt, and we're going to cook those mushrooms until they completely dry out and turn golden brown. We definitely want all that moisture to evaporate. We want to concentrate those flavors. We want to get these as meaty and earthy tasting as possible. We definitely want some nice color, which is another reason we cut these so tiny. We don't want big light-colored chunks in our dirt, because some smart-ass foodie friend will be like, hey, I thought this was dirt, not potting soil. So like I said, that's going to take a few minutes and we'll keep an eye on it. But while that's cooking, we can move on to dirt ingredient number 2, which is rye bread. So I have 3 slices of dark rye. That's as dark as I could find it. If you could actually find darker rye, that would work even better. And we're going to break that bread up into the food processor. And we're going to pulse it on and off until we have some fairly fine crumbs. And this definitely works better if the bread's a day or 2 old. Having said that, mine was totally fresh right out of the package and it worked fine. So we're going to process that off and on until we have crumbs, and then just reserve that until our mushrooms are ready, which should be very soon. So once that water evaporates, those mushrooms are going to brown pretty quickly. All right, in fact, I usually turn my heat down a little at this point. Okay, so that probably took me 7 or 8 minutes total. And when the mushrooms look like that, we're going to go ahead and dump in our rye crumbs. I'm going to adjust the heat to about medium, and we're going to basically toast those breadcrumbs until they get crisp. And at first there'll be a good amount of steam escaping. That bread was fairly moist, but eventually it will dry out and start to crisp up. Now at this point you have to decide whether you have enough olive oil to make that happen. All right, once you mix it all in, if it seems a little dry, which mine did, go ahead and drizzle in a little more oil and then give that a mix and keep cooking it. And by the way, if you learned how to flip stuff in a pan with our now famous cheese balls video, you can definitely use that technique here. Perfect application for it. So we're going to keep those crumbs moving. We're going to keep them moving until they start to crisp up. And how you know that's happening, you can kind of feel it with the spatula, but you're also going to go by sound. When the end is nearing, you'll be hearing something that sounds like this. And at that point, we're going to add the last of our dirty ingredients, which is going to be some ground almonds, also known as almond flour. I had some left over from our macaron video. And no, you don't have to buy almond flour. Just chop or crush some almonds and make your own. So we're going to stir that in, and not only is that going to add another dimension of flavor, but it's also going to make our dirt look even more realistic, almost like fine specks of sand or stone in the dirt. All right, but we don't want those specks bright white. So I want you to keep cooking this on medium, tossing it constantly for at least 3 or 4 more minutes until those little pieces of almond toast up and everything gets perfectly crispy. And if you want to play it safe, you can lower the heat a little bit, maybe down to medium-low, and just keep toasting until you're sure it's done. So I gave mine a taste here. Be careful, it's hot. But it was absolutely crispy, and I don't know if delicious is the right word, but it was exactly what I was after. It was grainy, crispy, earthy, with a slightly bitter edge. So at this point, our dirt is done. We're going to let that cool completely. And while we're waiting, we're going to go ahead and build our tomato salad. So in a bowl, I'm going to start with 4 little scoops of burrata cheese. That is an incredibly rich, unbelievably decadent mozzarella. And then, of course, some freshly sliced, super sweet vine-ripe tomatoes. Those darker ones are Brandywine. Those lighter ones are dry-farmed Early Girl, which are grown with a minimum of water, which makes them extra super sweet. I'm going to dress mine very simply with some white wine vinegar, and then a generous drizzling of extra virgin olive oil. I mean, you really can't put too much olive oil on this, but I want you to try. And then we'll season that up with some freshly ground black pepper and some kosher salt. Any salt's going to work, but the larger flake of the kosher looks nice on a salad. I'm also going to scatter over some fresh basil. And then it's time to get dirty. Oh, and speaking of dirty, before I forget, hey Miley, you're no Christina. Okay, I feel better. So let's go ahead and dirty this up. We're going to sprinkle it around the outside, kind of lightly. I want that beautiful red tomato color to come through. But then in the center, we're going to make a nice pile so we have plenty of crumbs to go around. I mean, if you're not going to get dirt in every forkful, what's the point? And that tomato and dirt salad is done. What a fun and delicious way to use up the last of the summer tomatoes. I'm also going to go out on a limb and say the kids are going to like this one because, they're going to tell their friends they're eating dirt. And yes, of course, this is a gimmick, but it's okay. Gimmicks are fine in the kitchen as long as it's incredibly tasty, and this was. And of course, the cheese, tomatoes, and the basil works together. But then when you combine those crispy, earthy, and like I said, slightly bitter crumbs, you have something that's just infinitely more interesting than your average fresh tomato salad. So anyway, this late in the season, you may be running out of ideas for what to do with all those fresh, sweet, vine-ripened tomatoes. And if that's the case, I really hope you give this a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.